Hello everyone. Now that you know the basics of business writing, we'll deep dive into one particular type of business writing, that is blogging. So in this session, we'll dissect how to write a blog and figure out what are the key elements, how can you improve writing a blog, how can you improve the formatting of a blog, and essentially how to write a good blog. But before that, let's jog your memory. When was the last time you read a blog? Not a Facebook post or an Instagram caption, but an actual blog. Hard to recall? But then, is that really your fault? No, that's not. It's the blogger's fault. How? Because it's easy to write a blog, but writing one that your target audience actually remembers and can recall is a pretty interesting and challenging task. And that is what we're going to focus on today. The web in its entirety is a very noisy place, with information accessible through your cell phones, tablets, laptop devices, anywhere, everywhere. It's very difficult to craft a content that cuts through all of that noise and actually reaches your audience. So why blog? But before that, what actually is a blog? So you all probably know the answer to that. It is an only online diary or a dictionary that is located on a website. It is typically updated regularly and one that is run by an individual or a small group. Well, that is the dictionary meaning at least. The different types of blogs that are out there in the market, but what we will focus on are business blogs. But yes, the question is, why do people bother blogging? So here are a few statistics that you would like to notice, and it'll probably help you understand why is blogging so critical. So, a HubSpot research stated that blogging is the most critical content marketing tactic for 2019. Not only that, according to Google, 10% of users' daily information needs involvement about learning in a broad topic. So, videos and stuff like articles are engaging, but when it comes down to drilling down and going to the nitty gritties of one subject, long format content such as blogs or journals work better. More than that, people trust blogs, right? I mean, your blog is almost like a human angle of your business. It's almost like where you find your voice. You can explore your audience's issues and concerns here. You can probably have a comment section where your audience can also address issues or respond to your thoughts. It could be almost something as important as differentiating you from your competitor. Another fact is that blogging drives traffic to your website. Now, this is another study that states that 75% of users never scroll through past the first page of results, right? So, when you type something on the Google search engine, you never really go to the second page unless it's really the first page really does not give you any information. So, it is very important for you to blog to the right audience so that your blog or article or your website comes on the first page of Google. So let's begin with how do you blog, or what are the key elements of blogging. The first thing that is most important is the headline of your blog. So it is very important to grab your reader's attention. Why? Because a typical attention for any reader spans between 10 to 8 seconds, right? And 60% of the readers do not read past the headline. So headline is something that is very interesting and very critical for your reader to actually stick to your blog or that web page and read the rest of your content. Now, how to write a great headline, right? So, the first thing that you probably want to do is start with a working title. For example, if I am supposed to blog about blogging, I'll probably have, ideas like a guide to business blogging or something like how to get started with blogging. Another interesting idea is to have your blog in a listicle format. What do I mean by that? Is something like 5 ideas on how to start blogging, 10 best blogging strategies we love and why. Another interesting example that is mentioned here is 4 questions to help you call BS on AI. So all of these things where you have particular numbers is called listicle kind of blogs. And why they help you is because, think about it, right? I give you 10 paragraphs on how to write a good blog versus I give you 10 bullet points on how to write a better blog, which would be more, beneficial to you or more appealing to you. Something that is bulleted and crisp, right? So that is also something that people in the blogging world like. Another important aspect is a featured image. Now, a featured image is something that usually sits on top of a blog post, and it's almost like another element drawing attention to the readers, right? So again, go back to the moment where you're seeing a big wall of text versus you seeing images and you're seeing some written pieces of information. You're seeing some graphs and some explanation to those graphs. So it's almost like a graphically and textually balanced piece of content that you're seeing versus just a wall of text. So feature image also adds another dimension to your entire blog. Another thing to think about is that this feature image that you choose to include in your blog, it should intrigue the readers or provoke their thought process or do some, basically engage some reaction from them or provoke some reaction out of them. And while that should be the case, the feature image that you're using should also not be very literal or very obvious in terms of, just already telling the people what you want to say, because you also want the readers to read the rest of your blog and article versus just seeing the feature image and understanding everything that you want to convey, right? The next thing, and a very critical thing again, is the introduction. Your readers need to be able to quickly understand what you're trying to talk about, A, and B, you need to have that hook where they're actually interested to read about the rest of your article, right? Nobody likes a clickbait, so you also want to make sure that your article is actually what the headline or the introduction is about, right? So make sure that all of these items fall into place: your headline, your introduction, and the actual content of your article. Another thing that you could probably figure out or think about is you could add a humorous approach while you're introducing your topic. It could be, you could start with something interesting, a surprising fact. You could start with a question, or make the introduction interesting so that the reader would actually want to read through the rest of your blog. And your introduction is basically setting the foundation or the context for the rest of your blog. So it should be as attention grabbing as possible. The next thing is the body or the actual meat of your blog post, right? So again, go back to the thing that we discussed in business writing. Your entire thought or your entire content should be separated by subheaders and topics, so that it's almost like you're breaking down your entire idea into topics and subtopics, and you're logically distributing them across your blog, right? they, there are some really interesting facts that I mentioned here, that the top 10 Google results are between 2000 to 2400 words. In terms of blogs, the ideal blog length is roughly around 2000 words. And se- mm, there's another firm, Medium, that found that 7 minutes to read posts earned the most engagement and attention. So ideally, this is talking about the length of your blog and how much time does it take for a person to read through your entire blog. Another interesting point to note here is that, when you think about how much time does a person take to read through your blog, it's not necessarily always about the length of the blog, but it's also about how easy it is for people to understand what you've written. If you've used Shashi Tharoor's language in whole of your blog, the reader probably would be checking the dictionary half the time and would probably take double the amount of time to read through the entire blog, and even more to understand all of it, right? So you do not want to be doing that. You do not want to make reading your blog a semester project for your readers. The next thing is data. Now, this might not seem that important to you, but it is very important. Why? Because data and numbers add a credibility factor to your blog. So, when you say that 90% of my customers are satisfied with my product's performance, it is almost like you quoting a number, and the number basically adds credibility. What further could add credibility is when you're quoting numbers from other data research firms or consulting firms. For example, when you say that this for 52% of Google users find blogging more interesting versus videos or versus other article formatted content, you're almost quoting a number, setting the context for your content, and then moving forward. And it almost gives you a highlight into why is blogging that important. So numbers and data play a very important role when you're trying to introduce a new concept or even trying to talk about a trend that is following in the market today, and how can people leverage that trend for their benefit. The next thing is multimedia elements, right? So just make sure that whenever it's possible to use a multimedia content to add a logical break to your blog, you should always go ahead and do that. And why is this important? Because the same example, right, having a block of text versus having a graphically and textually distributed piece of content where both the graphics as well as the text is balanced, right? And also think about it, right? I give you a whole one paragraph writing in writing to understand something versus I give you a graphical representation of that same idea. It'll be much more easier to consume that graphical piece of information versus that written wall of text. How you can add these multimedia elements is by adding images, adding videos or audio files or audio recordings to your blog. Social media posts is also a new fad that is getting a lot of traction these days, so you might also want to try or research on what social media posts you can include in your blogs. The next and another critical element is the conclusion to your blog. Now understand that when a reader is reaching to the conclusion of your blog, you essentially want that person to probably click on a call to action or get redirected to a different blog post, or basically do something at the end of your blog. It does not need to be lengthy, but it should serve the purpose of recapping your blog post. You can choose to have further resources or links to other pages there, but your conclusion should be very crisp, right? For example, you see the example here of where the conclusion is written in an entire paragraph versus here where there's one graphic and just one line summarizing the entire paragraph that's written here. The next thing is call to action, right? So you finish your conclusion in a meaningful way with the help of a call to action, right? You could choose to give an advice to your reader, you could redirect them to another content piece, you could redirect them to a form, to another webinar, to another video series, to your product information, to your sales guide. It could be anything, but there has to be something is what is important, right? So you should always use the last lines of your post to leave the reader feeling like he or she has learned something from you and there's even more to learn from you, and they should feel the desire to click a link or a CTA image or to read further, or basically do some further action rather than just clicking the back button and going back to the search results and feeling not really satisfied with your blog. So all of this is about how to write a blog, but the more important thing is how to write a good one. So let's see a couple of interesting points in terms of how to write a good blog. So the first and foremost thing is the format of your blog. So this is something that you've been told again and again across your training, something that looks better sells better, right? So what is a poorly formatted blog content? Something, like I said, it's a wall of text. There's no image, there's no social media buttons, there's no graphic, there are no margins. It's just a text, right? You do not want to have just blocks of text in your content, right? It is almost like intimidating and time consuming. It almost seems like very intimidating and time consuming for any reader that comes across, and the first look itself is not a very good one. The second thing again is imageless, because images break up your content and add an extra dimension to the blog that you have. So you should definitely have images across your blog. These basically list a few key things that you should have to format a blog in a good looking manner, right? So the first is obviously headings. So you should, all the headings, titles and subheadings that you have across your blog, they should be properly highlighted, put in bold faces or differentiated with color. So basically a person should be able to understand or be able to navigate easily between the different headings and subheadings. It's also a very unique way to break up your content, so you should definitely make the best use out of it. The second thing is lists. Lists also are a very effective way to break up your content into easily navigationable or scannable portions. So you should always feel free to use bullet points or numbered lists whenever they are appropriate. The next thing is short paragraphs, because if you have really long paragraphs, it seems like you're just rambling, and it almost seems very difficult for the person to follow through the entirety of it. Another common thing is add images and add image captions, so that it's easier for people to understand not just what the image is about, but also what is the relevance of that image with respect to your blog post. Another could be using colors to your advantage. For example, if there's a particular number that you want to mention, if there's a particular quote that you want to mention, you might want to use or play with colors just to differentiate that from the rest of your text. And you can also bold your text to customize the focus of your readers. For example, here in the title of this particular slide, we have 7 tips of formatting content in bold and black color. While this good blog is also in black color, what I want to draw the focus of my audience on is 7 tips for formatting content, right? So that is how you can play with colors and also play with fonts such as bold, and redirect your focus, or the redirect the focus of your audience. The next thing is valuable content, right? So epic content is something that is valuable to the customer or the reader, but what really is a valuable content? So there are a couple of interesting points here. One is that your content should be original, it should be relevant to the audience, it should be useful, it should be actionable, engaging and honest. So let's discuss in detail what each of these mean. So the first thing is original. If you copy a content from other resources without really adding a original value or adding a source, your Google rank could definitely be affected. And there are a couple of very easy ways to identify an unoriginal content. One of them could be a quote overload. For example, if an article contains an excessive amount of quotes, it almost lowers the writer's credibility, as it seems that someone else can say things better than the writer themselves can, right? So the next thing is obvious statements, right? For example, when you read the sentence marketing is good for business in an article that is titled why you need marketing for your business, it almost indicates that the writer is not much of an original thinker, because that person is probably just repeating or rearranging the words. Another thing is a similar points. So if you come across an article or a brand that uses similar or same points from other more reputable brands, it almost feels like they're copying content from those better reputable brands. So the next time you Google top 10 of something, click on the first 3 articles and see if any of them are same. They'll probably not be the same. The next thing is 8 tips for creating original content. So here are some tips or ideas that you could probably use to come up with your own original content. The first is obviously to brainstorm ideas. So once you have a topic, use the convergent and divergent thinking that has been taught to you to brainstorm different angles to the same topic or different ideas towards the same topic, and come up with your own storyboard in terms of how do you organize the different ideas or sub ideas in that entire content piece. The second thing is try to bring in a personal touch or a personal connect or an emotional hook angle towards your entire content, so that the entire piece seems much more relatable to the users. The third thing that you could try is probably conduct an interview. If you're writing in something that is, if you're writing about something that you're pretty unfamiliar with or you do not know much about, why can you can always go ahead and conduct an interview with someone who's much more known with the content or context of things with respect to that particular subject, and you could probably proceed from there. A couple of other ideas could be writing about success stories or failure stories or case studies, in which you basically summarizing what happened, how it happened, what were the pain points, what was the solution, how did the solution get implemented, did the people come to that particular solution, ultimately did that solution fail, did it pass, what were the results in favor of the company, were they against it, what were the lessons learned, what were the benefits to that, all of those things, right? So you basically you have a huge chunk of information or meat, that is the body for that particular content, if you want to write an article on a failure story, case study, or success story. Reviews and guides are also another interesting ideas to think about when you want to write a content piece. The second thing is the relevance of the content. So think about it. Wouldn't it seem strange if McDonald's started writing blogs about shoes? Well, yes, because shoes are completely irrelevant to McDonald's unless McDonald's decides to put burgers, or starts burgers in the shape of shoes. What you should think about is how to identify irrelevant content, and more importantly how to make sure that your article is relevant to your target audience. So one easy way to identify is with comments. If no one cares enough to leave even a single comment in your comment section of the blog, then probably the blog was not that they did not feel that it was that relevant to them. Another thing is shares. Again, if you notice that people are visiting your blog but not sharing or liking your article or adding any comments of it, it's probably an indicator that they did not find the information very relevant or useful to them. Now, 3 tips for creating relevant blog. Number one, obviously, is to identify your audience, understand what are their interests, what are their biases, what are their pain points, what is something they would care about, what would they be interested in, right? Second thing is study the different demographics of your audience. Now demographics is also something that you would have probably studied about when you were taught about buyer journey. But just to do a quick recap, it could be something like, what is the age group of your audience, which geography does your audience belong from, are there people who have kids, are there people who are typically female, are there people who are typically male, are there people who are more on the urban side, are there people who are more corporate and office going, versus are there more young enthusiastic people. So just try to understand the different demographics and the psychology of your audience. The third and another pretty important thing is hop on trends, right? For example, if there's a social media fad going on today, why should you not leverage that or leverage some social media angle to your story? For example, if you come across a news and you can use that as an analogy for something that you are trying to tell about you are trying to tell to your audience, why not use that analogy, draw a comparison to your content, and then write your entire blog around it. The next thing is useful. So, useful blog posts are typically educational tools that answer questions or solve audiences' problems, right? How many times have you googled something that starts with how do I dash, right? I mean, it is pretty common. How do I buy a cell phone? How do I cook? How do I book a cab? How do I use this new product? Things like that. So a couple of things that you should probably understand is that whenever you're writing a blog, you should always think about what's in it for them, essentially, right? What would the audience like to know about, what are their questions, what are their concerns, right? And as a part of your blog, you should have the answers to those very questions or concerns. Now, how do you identify a useless content, right? Education is the number one point. If your blog is not able to answer any question or solve any problem for the audience or teach any useful information to the audience, it probably is not very useful for them, right? Unfindable. Now, this is a very key thing here. If someone writes a very nice blog and it's written very well, it's formatted very well, it looks really good, but no one has ever seen it. Was it ever written at all? If no one can find your blog post and no one can read it, then what is the point of it at all, right? So you should always have sharing buttons on your blog so that your blog can be shared with more number of people, be it Instagram, be it Twitter, be it LinkedIn. You should always have those buttons. And also the point around SEO, right? So that search engine optimization that you learned about recently. So your blog should be able to rank on Google. It should not appear on the 17th page of Google because probably no one will read it then. Another thing is ignoring comments, right? So a lot of times it happens that authors write the blogs but they never check the blog section in the comment section, and they never respond to the questions posed by the readers, right? It almost seems like the author is not listening to her audience questions or concerns, and that is not something that you want to be doing as a blogger. Now, 3 tips for creating useful content is: number one, you should understand what your readers want to know about. What are their questions? What are their concerns? Right? Also, go through the comment section of your blog to keep a check on what are the comments that are being posted, if there is a new thread on or a new comment or a new trend that has developed on the blog that you had written earlier. You should always go ahead and respond to that and let the readers know that you're still attentive and following that piece of content, right? You're still active. The third thing, and a more important thing, is search engine optimization. Even the most educational blog posts are useless without SEO. So I'll not deep dive into how SEO can be leveraged for blogs or why is it important, but just understand that SEO is something that will help your help you to make your blogs reachable to the right audience. So you should always use that as a very essential tool whenever you're blogging. The next thing is actionable, right? Blog posts that convert readers into customers are actionable, right? Why do you need a blog post to be actionable? Well, to tell you the truth, people are lazy and often reluctant to think about what is the next step. They probably read through an article, they probably understood what it is about, but what next? They're not really going to Google about your company's name and go to your product demo page on their own, right? You have to tell the readers what to do, right? You need to be able to lead them to the next piece of content or to the sales demo page of your website, or to to be able to talk to a sales guy on your team or of your company, right? You have to tell the customers or tell the readers what to do next. And how to identify an unactionable content? The first is by using analytics, right? You can check how many people liked or shared or commented on your post, right? There are things like bounce rate, that what is the time for which a particular reader stayed on your blog page, right? If these numbers are high, then it means that your blog basically made an impact on the readers, right? They went to a different page, or they did spend some time on your blog. The second obviously is comments. When as a blogger, when you go and check your comments, you should always look for any positive feedback that you have received in your comments section. If people have benefited from your blog post, it's a culture, at least in the US, where people let you know in the comment section that it was really good and they benefited from it. Now, 4 tips for creating actionable content. The first is obviously give real examples, right? Because when you give real examples, you seem much more credible as a person. For example, when I say that Adidas used my company's products to get this so and so result, versus having a quote from some lady at Adidas who's saying that my team received these results because of the product that I used from so and so company. The real example A and the real example coming directly from the horse's mouth, that is the customer's mouth, adds a great credibility factor to your entire blog. The second thing is use visuals. Again, you do not want to just intimidate the reader by just presenting a wall of text. You want to engage and interact with the audience more with more visual elements. Third is provide a clear call to action. If you have 10 buttons at the end of your blog, the reader will probably be confused where to click and rather click on the back button, right? So you want to have really clear call to actions in terms of where do you want to lead the reader next. The fourth thing is to have a comment section where the reader can choose to give a positive feedback if they want to. The next thing is keep your content engaging. Engaging content is a content that is read all the way through. If you write a blog and I'm not really engaged by it, I'll probably read it halfway and go back or close that particular window, right? So you want to make sure that your blog is engaging. Now, what does engaging really stand for? Your blog should be interesting, it should be informative, it should be beneficial to the reader, and it should be relevant to them. These are basically the four pillars on which any engaging content stands on, right? Now, how do you make sure that you write engaging content? Well, the first thing to do is write a killer headline and write a killer introduction, right? So here you can use a lot of concepts that you've learned before in terms of, using a surprise element at the start of the blog as a part of your introduction, using some controversy as your headline, using using a fear tactic in the title itself so that the people feel that they should really read through the rest of the article, right? So just use a lot of different concepts, keep it surprising, keep it concise, keep it crisp, keep it something controversial. The choice is up to you, but the ultimate objective is that the reader's interest should be piqued by your headline and your introduction. The third thing is use popular culture. So you want to be relatable to the readers, you want to be relatable to the audience that is reading through your blog. So you want to make sure that you're using characters that are known to them versus using a character that is not known to them. For example, if you're trying to draw an analogy with Mickey Mouse, that'll probably be relatable to most folks out there in the world. While if you're trying to use a character that is probably someone from a typical Indian TV series, that might not be something that will be relatable to a larger section of the audience, right? So you want to use popular culture. The fourth thing and the fifth thing is to focus on the flow and to focus on the depth of your article. Flow, why? Because you do not want to seem to be telling 10 different things at the same time, right? You want to make sure that the entire content that you have on your blog is flowing in a seamless manner where it almost seems like you're talking to the reader versus just writing a huge bunch of words on a web page. Depth, why? Because after giving too much interest in the headline, in the introduction, you do not want to seem shallow to your readers, right? So you always want to make sure that you've done your research, you've done your homework on the blog so that you are actually able to present value to the customers versus just presenting some words and lines out there that basically talk about the problem but do not really go deep into the solution. The next thing is to be honest, right? Because honestly in writing refers to sourcing and citing. That if you've taken a data point from somewhere, you're basically adding them or that particular report or that particular company as a source for that, right? You want to cite the quotes that you've used from some other author. You want to cite their names in your particular article or blog because you do not want to be caught copying words or articles or phrases or paragraphs or someone else's content, right? And not only will Google punish you for a ranking you punish your ranking for improper sourcing, but also in general as a community you will be looked down upon because, as I mentioned before, whenever you're presenting a writing or an article or a blog to the rest of the world on behalf of your company, it's almost like you've changed the profile picture of your company, and you do not want that profile picture to be someone else's and someone else coming and claiming that you basically copied my work, right? It's looked upon very much in the corporate world. Right, so four things about writing honestly or writing honest content is one, paraphrasing. So even if you want to take some part of the content from some other writer or some other author, for example Neil Patel, he is a great blogger. You can probably go and check out his website and see huge amount of information that he's provided on blogging, on tips and tricks of marketing, and about a lot many other stuff, right? So if I want to take some inspiration from him or use some idea of his that I have used personally in my blogging, what I can do is probably paraphrase his idea and put it in my blog, and also cite him as the source for that particular idea. So that is what paraphrasing is about. It is all about, right? That you put the words of the other speaker in brief in your own blog and also quote them as the author for that particular idea or blog, right? Second thing obviously is quoting, citing, and source images. You also want to be doing all of those things just to make sure that you're giving the right credit to the right owner of that particular idea or piece of content. Now we'll talk about common pitfalls that you should avoid while writing a blog. But before we do that, we'll just do a quick recap of 7 tips for formatting content: headings, lists, paragraphs which are short, images along with image captions, using color to differentiate different items and using them to your advantage, keeping the text in bold just to customize the focus of your readers, right? These are the 7 tips for formatting content so that they look good. The next is to have a valuable content, which basically includes being original, keeping the content relevant, making sure it's useful, actionable, engaging, and honest, right? So now we come to the first mistake that people typically do, and what is the solution for that. So as a marketer, you typically think of ideas all day, all night, right? And you come across an idea that you feel is really, really interesting. But you always want to go ahead and do that research and homework and analytics in terms of whether that idea is really important or relevant to your audience, right? So you want to create a blog that serves your larger company goals versus an idea that you feel is very interesting, right? You always want to do that homework before you present that idea to your boss, to your manager, or even before you decide to work more on that particular idea. You want to be sure that that idea is really something that is valuable to your larger audience. The second thing is your writing is too stiff. You do not want to write sentences in a very report writing kind of a manner, or where you seem way too formal. It should seem that you're just talking to the reader, not really trying to make an impression, not trying to write court briefs to that reader, but just talking to that reader. So that is a mistake that people often do, but the solution is just to write and act, just to write how you would talk to that reader. The third thing people often do is you think people care about you as a writer. Well, with millions and millions of writers and bloggers out there in the world, and the noise that is, omnipresent around in the World Wide Web, you do not want to, you don't, it's not really a fact where readers care about you as a writer. You show your personality, you do not tell it, right? You show your personality through the writing. It's basically the way you've written your content basically reflects on how you've thought about it, and you want to be very sure in terms of used the correct writing, correct grammar, correct, you've basically packaged that entire thing how you would package your personality to the readers. Fourth mistake that people often do is people digress, right? You're talking about one thing, it might lead to another very interesting topic, but that does not necessarily mean that you will actually include that topic in your own blog, right? It is one piece of article, it is one piece of content. It should essentially be focused on one core idea versus including 10 different ideas in the same piece of content, right? Make sure that you reiterate your point again and again and stick to your core topic versus digressing, right? The fifth thing that people often do is not really think through their topics very well and keep the topic really broad so that a lot of other angles come into picture. So it is important to understand that you should not keep your topic very narrow also. It should be broad, but then that there should be a balance between that, right? You should start with a very specific working title. You should focus on a core idea that is limited to a certain number of elements or angles. You do not want to keep it very broad. For example, if I am trying to target audience that work in credit, I should not write an article about finance because it is a very broad spectrum. Similar example, if I want to target youngsters who are following a particular act or a particular news article, or if I want to target youngsters who are following politics, I'll not write about news in general, but I'll write about maybe the channels that are showcasing political views of the politicians in our city, and tailor the contents in such a way that there is more appealing to the younger audience. The sixth mistake that people often do is writing in a way where it's just a brain dump, right? You do not want to be doing that. You want to use a specific post type, you want to create an outline of the thing, and you want to use headers. So basically what I'm trying to say is that you have something in your head, you have the curse of knowledge, but all you're trying to do is just dump that entire thing as on your web page, versus trying to customize it for your readers, for your audiences, and actually break that down into an outline, break that down into a storyboard or a Skype app, and actually arranging all of that content so that it flows smoothly, right? Just think about it. You have a bunch of numbers, equations, words, alphabets on your web page, versus you have a really organized content piece on your web page as a blog, right? You do not want to be just doing a brain dump as a part of your blog. The next thing is you do not use data as evidence, right? So that is something that you always should be doing when you include data and metrics or trends or graphs in your blog. You should always want to draw conclusions from them or try to stitch it back to your core idea or thought, right? You should use data and research to back up your claims that you make in your post. So basically that not only adds that credibility factor in your blog, but also add that rapport with the customer, that this person is actually researched behind the blog or the idea he's trying to tell me, and presented that also in front of me, right? So you want to look really prepared, and your blog should seem really well crafted on the whole. The eighth thing that people often do is your content borders on plagiarism. When drawing from others' ideas, do make sure that you're citing them and you're giving the right credit to the right resources, so that A, your Google rank is not affected, and B, you're not looked down upon in general in the community. The next thing is, if you think that you're done, once you're done, you've written the blog and published it, you're very, very wrong. You're very mistaken, right? You should always take at least 30 minutes to post, to edit post, to edit your post basically, right? You should always think that what is the way that I can probably improve this content. You should have another person have a look at it, where that person is proofreading your blog or looking at it from a different person's perspective, right? You should always make sure that you know you're not you've given your 100% in your first draft, but that is not the end of it. You should probably try to get more people to review it, so that you can get different perspectives and opinions on that, and also make sure that your point is coming across. You do not want to be influenced by the curse of knowledge and end up not really being able to communicate what you wanted to communicate in the first place. So this basically brings us to the end of this session on the anatomy of a blog, and I hope you guys have got some idea in terms of how to improve your writing, your blog writing, or how to be a better blogger. And I hope you guys do not do these common mistakes that people tend to do in general, and I hope you become a better blogger. See you in the next video.